Let's date forever. Here's your weekly dose of relationship fuel with Sammy and Nathan Yeager. Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about maintaining connection over a long-term relationship, how we can repair after conflict, and how we can avoid the roommate syndrome. But before we dive into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
The thing that fueled me up most this week was our Sunday date.
Yeah.
We had such a nice afternoon at the beach, swimming, hanging out, talking, chatting, hitting a ball back and forth, walking, and then probably the most beautiful picnic on the hill, sunset over the beach, just beautiful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice, and it was a nice way to end kind of our holiday break.
Yeah, it was. Nice little bookend to it.
Yeah. What about you? What fueled you up this week?
We had another date earlier in the week. So we had a little bit of a photo shoot around the Sydney Opera House. So it was a bit of a strange feeling, but it was really nice to be able to hang out with you and make out with you and get a few really good shots. And we're yet to get the photos back though, so we'll have to wait and see how they turned out. But I'm sure there's going to be a couple of hero shots in there. And then we just went out for a nice dinner and drinks as well, which was super nice. 2
dates this week.
Yeah, feeling a bit spoiled this week.
Yeah, that was really, really fun. And the way that came about was so impromptu and just a bit of divine timing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So my romantic relationship's feeling really fueled up this week. So on that note, let's dive into this week's episode.
Today we have Cheri Timko joining us. She is a couples relationship coach and couples psychotherapist. She works with seasoned couples who have fallen into roommate syndrome so that they can dare to date again. Herself, she's been married for over 20 years and has 3 teenage daughters. Welcome to the show, Cheri.
Thank you so much for having me.
Gosh, you seasoned professional for sure, working with seasoned couples. Tell us a little bit about, maybe we'll start with your own personal story. Tell us a little bit about your marriage. You've been married for over 20 years.
Yeah, very happily married for the most part. When we met, it was kind of like we fell in step together. Mm-hmm. And there have been almost no times when we weren't in step together. There are times when it's been rough or we've been in a rough season, or even day to day we can be kind of grumpy or irritable with each other. But there's that basic cadence of life. It's always felt like we were walking down a path next to each other. And
that's such a nice way to describe it, walking together in step.
So has that been something that you've needed to stay on the same page about and continually understand where each of you want to be going? Or is it something that has more organically happened for you?
For us, it's happened pretty organically. But one of the things that we've recognized really early on is when we feel disconnected, what are the things that we need to do so that we can reconnect? Because couples move in and out of connection. And sometimes that can feel really distressing or feel like you're with the wrong partner. But if you instead think of it like, oh, that's a flag. I need to do the things that we do so that we reconnect again, then you can weather that disconnection and connection as it happens.
Yeah. I know that one of the early skills that Nathan and I had to build was not just how to do conflict well, but then also the repair afterwards and reconnection afterwards so that we could maintain that connection. Because I know that doesn't necessarily come overly organically to everybody. And sometimes we haven't been given a great blueprint to do conflict. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a couple that has a really good conflict process is able to bring up a problem and they talk that problem through until they get to a solution they can both live with. And when that falls into an argument, instead of a discussion, they take a break and come back to it. There are a couple of places where couples routinely make mistakes. Mm-hmm. One is they'll avoid the conflict until they're so frustrated that it blows up right out of the gate. Another is they will think that they need to just keep pushing through even when that conversation is just totally derailed. Another place is they'll rush to get a solution, so they won't look at a lot of different options. They'll just pick the first one that seems like it'll work. And they don't think about whether that's really one that they're both happy with. And probably the last thing is they don't come back to the conversation. So they want a problem to be a one and done conversation rather than a conversation that they have, then they put it down, then they come back to it, then they put it down and come back to it.
I really like what you shared there. There's a few things, but I think one of the generic pieces of marriage advice that you hear bounced around a lot is like, never go to bed angry. I actually think that's terrible advice. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree. I think that's terrible advice. But here's why. It's not that you shouldn't go to bed in agreement. That doesn't mean that you stay up until you have worked that problem out. But it does mean that you get to a point where you put that argument down and you remember that you actually like this person and you want to be with them. So that doesn't just apply at bedtime. That really applies at any time of the day. Being able to end that conflict and then go back to regular life. But usually couples will let that resentment and frustration drag on hours, days sometimes, and in extreme situations for weeks. So bringing that end and say, okay, we're ready. Let's go back to the things that we do when we're not arguing.
Yeah.
So it's that more conscious action of pushing pause on an argument or a misalignment or something and then coming back to it later.
It's seeing that argument in the bigger picture, that argument doesn't define the relationship. That argument is just one little detail of the relationship, even if it feels huge.
Yeah.
So when you bring it to an end and you go back to regular life where you like each other, it says, this is just an argument. This doesn't define us.
Yeah, but that ability to say, hey, this conversation or this discussion, this argument is no longer resourceful. It doesn't mean I don't care about it, and it doesn't mean I don't want a solution, but the pattern that we're in right now isn't getting us any closer to that. I think that's a really nuanced element of conflict that took us a little while to get to.
I think couples have to work this out, and they're not looking for a set of rules that fit every couple. They're really looking for the set of rules that really is the intersection of their two personalities. You want to be different people. You want to bring different things to the problem, and you want a solution that fits those things.
I also really liked what you said there about like resisting the urge to just solve it immediately and jump to the first possible band-aid that we can find, because I know that this is not just in romantic relationships, but any relationships in business or in career or whatever it is that you're trying to solve or improve, that we can end up treating like the top level symptoms as opposed to getting curious about what the true like root cause is. It's like, you know, if people are falling into the river, how about we go further upstream and find out why that's happening? So talk to us a little bit about how we can get more comfortable sitting in that conflict till we find a true solution as opposed to a top level Band-Aid type solution.
Curiosity is one of my favorite tools for that. Usually when we're talking to our partner, we're already rehearsing what we're going to say, what our argument is. So when you stay in curiosity, you look for what your partner is thinking and feeling about that. You're already an expert on your own opinion. What you're not is an expert on your partner's. So staying curious lets you learn that piece of it. And that's really where those deeper issues come out. And that's really where finding a really good solution is, because you stay with that conversation until you really understand where the other person is coming from.
I love that advice of staying curious, because I might have thought I knew what Sammy's opinion was at some point in time, but it's not to say that hasn't changed or it's not going to continue to change into the future as well. So I think even though something might have worked a while ago in your relationship or Sammy had an opinion on something, then doesn't mean that that's still what she's thinking, feeling, her view on something is.
Yeah, and we're supposed to change. That's not something that threatens our relationship. It's when we don't track those changes and we don't continue to know our partner that we start to get disconnected, and then we feel like we've chosen the wrong partner or think we lost that spark. But really, it's just staying reconnected so staying connected so that you can continue to grow as people and grow in the relationship.
So while we're talking about conflict and that element of repairing afterwards, what are some of the things that we can do to make sure that when we've resolved a conflict, we really do, put it to bed, or that it is done and that we can repair and move forward, like so that we can avoid some of those things that you mentioned, like that building resentment and having that, storm cloud kind of linger around, because the argument might have been 20 minutes, but then some couples lose days, weeks, months to that storm cloud after the argument. So can you talk to us a little bit about like what does healthy repair after conflict look like?
Yeah, when an individual feels hurt or disappointed, let down by their partner, that needs to be repaired. Now, maybe some of it can slip by, but when it builds up, that's when you start to feel resentful towards one another. That's when conflict blows up bigger than it needs to. So the most straightforward repair is a good apology. Now, I say a good apology because there are lots and lots of bad apologies. It's hard for people to really settle down into themselves and take that accountability so that they can give a genuine apology. So that's the repair that most people think about when they talk about repairs. Other repairs are finding a fix for the problem so that you stop doing the same thing. Another repair might be doing something nice for your partner that you know that they've asked for, and doing it because you know that you need to make that repair.
So I know that one of the interesting things that I came across in kind of this space was the 5 apology languages. So, I mean, a lot of people have heard about the love languages, but Gary Chapman also kind of did some research into the apology languages. And there's a quiz that you can do for this as well, so you can go and find out what your apology language is. But like, I know that for some people, like just saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," like it doesn't actually mean anything to them. Like it doesn't hold that weight that it's kind of needed to be able to kind of fully resolve and repair from that conflict. So what I would recommend is people go and take that apology languages quiz to really understand how they actually like to receive an apology or how they can best kind of repair after a conflict. But also to understand your partner, to understand what they're kind of looking for in that space too.
I love Gary Chapman's work, both the love languages and the apology work. I have a format that I teach couples because I adapted it before I read his stuff, and it hits all of the different languages of apology. So it's 4 steps. The first step is I'm sorry for. And this is where you name the thing that you're actually sorry for having done. It's the thing you wish you had done better or differently.
Yeah, that's that ownership, accountability, responsibility part.
Step 2 is this is wrong because. And this is where you give some voice to how you hurt the other person. So you're acknowledging that what you did hurt them or let them down. Step 3 is in the future, I will. And this is the specific strategy that you are going to use so that you don't repeat that same behavior. Now, if you do the same thing again, then when you apologize, you need a different strategy because the strategy that you tried didn't work. So that's why you have to be pretty specific with that. Yeah. And the 4th is, will you forgive me? This is such a vulnerable question that people really avoid it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that structure, I guess, of apology, yeah, like you said, it does kind of touch on all of those aspects of those apology languages. And I've always kind of said this around the love languages as well, like that if you show love to your partner in all 5 of the languages, you can't really go wrong. Like you're going to hit one of them regardless of whether you know what it is or not. So like that structure of apology really does touch on all 5 of those apology languages anyway. And so, yeah, like I said, you can't really go wrong.
You also can't use this if you're still mad. Like you have to be calm. Otherwise, it sounds like, I'm sorry for yelling at you. This is wrong because you pushed all my buttons. In the future, I'll tell you to be quiet. Will you forgive me? Like that's what happens when you use that format and you're still mad. So you have to like calm down and actually be in a place.
Yeah, and you'll probably get back into the conflict if you try and apologize in that way without it being resolved.
And I think like all of these types of frameworks, they give you such a great jumping off point to have a conversation. So when Nathan and I learned about the 5 apology languages, because like most people, we'd heard about the 5 love languages, but hadn't heard about these 5 apology languages. So for anyone who's got an open loop and wants to know what they are, so it's make restitution, genuinely repent, expressing regret, accept responsibility, and request forgiveness. But Nathan and I both went and did the quiz, and my number 1 is to make restitution. And I think Nate's is actually the same. So, oh no, sorry, I think yours is expressing regret.
Yeah.
I have to be truly remorseful for what I did, and then how can I make it up to you? But I think it just created an emotionally sober way to have a conversation about, hey, I love you. And at some point in our relationship, I'm going to fuck up. I'm going to make a mistake and I'm going to need to apologize. And I want to do that in a way that you can receive it. So having that conversation about what your partner wants, needs, how can they close the circle? How can they feel complete after a conflict? I think is such a fundamental skill. And again, like the school's not teaching you how to do this. And it's unlikely that your parents sat you down and talked to you about the diagnostics of a great apology, especially when as a child, and we see parents do this a lot, is like you say sorry and then they like begrudgingly make a child say sorry for something that they don't really know what they're apologizing for. They haven't actually addressed how they're going to do it differently. And it's just the words, I'm sorry, or getting the words, I'm sorry out of the child. So it's not surprising that we don't have a great framework or a blueprint to build this skill. So thank you so much for sharing that. Cheri, I want to go back. Like in your bio, we said that you're a couples relationship coach and couples psychotherapist. So for anyone who's not heard that term psychotherapist before, can you clarify that for us? What does that truly mean?
So I came up through the world of psychotherapists. I'm a counselor. I specialize in helping couples navigate problems in their relationship and change the patterns. Usually in therapy, people come to it because they're in crisis or they've got some mental health issues or they have deep-seated, long history of problems. So coaching is a little bit different where it's more present and forward focused. It's like, here's what the pattern is. How do we break it? How do we move forward into the future and fix that? There's less of where did this come from in your childhood and delving into that past stuff.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So in your bio, we also shared this idea of the roommate syndrome. What is that? I can have a guess, but what is it?
Roommate syndrome, I think it's intuitive. Like we all know intuitively what it is. So roommate syndrome is when you fall into a pattern, usually in a rut, where you act the way you would if it were a platonic, maybe friend or maybe not even friend that you live with. So you stop doing the connecting things, you stop talking about things, you don't work on goals together. You just kind of exist in the same space without having a lot of connection. So it's not where we want to be in our marriages.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And how do people arrive there? You alluded to some of it there.
They can arrive there just because they're really busy. A lot of couples put their kids first. And of course, in different seasons of your relationship, you do need to put more energy into your kids. But there comes a point where you stop nurturing that marriage and give everything to the kids. Well, that's one of the things. Another thing that can lead to roommate syndrome is when couples try to avoid conflict. So they don't talk to each other because they're afraid it's going to blow up into an argument. And over time, they stop talking about more and more things.
Yeah. So what are some of the initial signs that you might be falling into this space of becoming glorified roommates more than like actual romantic relationship?
One of the signs is you stop thinking kindly about your partner. Here, you see what they do, and then you imagine that they did it for a bad reason. They did it because they wanted to get on your nerves, or they did it because they were selfish or not paying attention to you at all. Another sign would be if you guys don't spend time together. That breaks down that connection and you stop knowing each other. Another sign might be if you don't understand why your partner is doing something. Like in the beginning, we learned so much about our partner, and we can often anticipate how they're going to react to things because we know them so well. So if you get to that point and you're like, I don't know why they're doing that, that doesn't make any sense to me, then that means that you guys have stopped connecting and stopped talking about things.
I think this happens a lot for relationships, and I'm going to use like a real business framework. I think it's Einhauser's urgent important principle, but this idea that there's kind of four things. It's like, it's not important and it's not urgent. It's not important but urgent. It's important but not urgent. And then there's the important and urgent. And I feel like couples often let their relationship deteriorate to a point where it's all of a sudden very important and very urgent, as opposed to having prioritize their relationship in that important but not urgent. Our relationship is always important, but it doesn't necessarily ever get urgent where the pot is simmering and it's about to boil over until it has boiled over. So I really
it's like having food in the fridge or like stuff like that is probably more urgent, and so a lot of those things can, I guess, overtake.
Yeah, or you end up with things in your life that have the cloak of urgency, whether or not it's workplace stuff or family stuff or third-party things or kids or whatever the external thing is that is presenting itself as more urgent and somehow more important than your relationship. Because like you said, Cheri, like people can end up in this trap of like prioritizing their kids, but it's not always just kids. It could be like careers, sports, hobbies, interests, other relationships that take precedent or priority over your romantic relationship. And then all of a sudden you might find I shouldn't say all of a sudden, because it's not all of a sudden. It's a series of micro moments that have landed you into that roommate syndrome. And I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this idea that often when couples find themselves in therapy in the first few years of their relationship, it's because they haven't learned to do conflict and they've got to try and work out a way to do conflict. Whereas later stage, if couples find themselves in therapy, it can be because they've become friends and they need to figure out how to reconnect romantically. And I think it is one of those muscles that if we don't use it, you probably lose it. And that in the beginning of your relationship, it's all about getting to know that person and creating these opportunities for new experiences, achieving things together, having unique conversations. So I can see how without intentionality, and I mean, that's the whole premise of our show, right? Is about being intentional about dating yourself, having a really great relationship with you, and then having a really great relationship with your partner. So what are some of the preventative steps, tools, rituals, things that we can do to stay out of roommate syndrome, Cheri?
One of the things that we can do is don't give up the fun. We connect through fun. We connect through the excitement of getting to know this person, but then we get married and we act like it's not important. So making sure that you keep that fun, do those things that you both enjoy and help you connect. Another tip would be to have shorter, frequent conversations about conflict. They're not one and done conversations. You need to keep talking about the things that you're not in alignment about, but keep those conversations short and then have them more often. That helps you work through that and not let it get all built, not boil over and go into an argument.
Yeah.
Another tip would be to make time and space to connect with each other, and that you really need to connect with each other frequently, a few times a day. I think about these as good relationship habit, that you have these little touch points in your day when you check in with each other or you connect with each other. And that adds up every day to having a really strong relationship.
I like what you said there about having smaller conversations but more frequently. So Nathan and I had some guests on the show who talked about their weekly check-in chat, and we've kind of taken this concept and made it our own, and we've got our own agenda that we now run through every week. We generally do it on a Sunday. We call it our happy hour. But one of the questions in that weekly check-in chat is there anything you'd like me to apologize for? And in the beginning, it was quite uncomfortable because there were things that we'd both had that were like, hey, there never really was the right time, or it was a small thing, but it's still bugging me. But now I feel silly to bring it up because it was so long ago and it was small, but it got us.
Or it's happened a few times.
Yeah. Now there's a pattern and I don't know how to bring it up, but it created this environment and we've got so much more comfortable with that. And it's one of the things that served our relationship incredibly well because nothing sits or festers or grows. I think of resentment as like these little white ants that can eat away at the foundation of your relationship. And this might sound so basic, but one of the things that I learned really early in my personal development journey was that resentment comes from unmet expectations. And in relationships, we often have so many expectations that we've never even communicated. And then when someone's not met them, it's impossible for them to even know that or repair it. And then we've got all of these little white ants, resentment, eating it away at the foundation of what could otherwise look from the outside like a very sturdy relationship. But the reality, it's very fragile. So this question of, is there anything you would like me to apologize for, has brought out some things for us, and having those conversations frequently has been incredible. And now they're really easy because I shouldn't say they're easy.
No, it can still be tricky to bring up something.
Yeah.
But
the muscle is there. The muscle is built, and
there.
it's now much more about doing the reps than it is about building the muscle.
But there's that circle of trust between the two of us that it's not going to blow up into a big thing, and that we're there to work through it and to resolve it. And
yeah,
it's that trust and safety of knowing that the other person really will hear you out and think about it from your perspective. And so the more you do that, absolutely, that gets a lot easier.
And I also really like what you shared there about making time for one another and connecting regularly, whether or not that's like multiple times a day or whatever the dynamic is of your relationship. But there's 168 hours in a week, and some couples can't find like 1 or 2 or 3
or half
for each other at all. Like, this is your life. This is what the person that you've chosen. Surely they are important enough to prioritize for a few of those 168 hours. And I do think that, like we've said, it's easy for that to, their presence, they're around all the time. It's easy to sort of forget that they are a priority. But I really like the idea of, building habit and ritual around carving out intentional time to be together. So I'm pleased to hear that Date Forever is an antidote to roommate syndrome.
Absolutely. The John Gottman's research says that couples who want to have a truly extraordinary relationship spend 5 hours a week together. Now, that isn't 5 hours in a bulk. It's 5 hours like in little drips throughout the week, so that at the end of the week, your bucket is filled.
And I guess sleeping time doesn't count as being together.
Well, you're together, but it's not building your relationship most of the time.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. And it's also, when we say 5 hours, I'm going to share it because I think this piece of research from Gottman is so interesting and just a fundamental kind of something to work towards of mastery. So they talk about the 5 magic hours, and part 1 is partings, giving warm farewells. So estimating like a couple of minutes each workday to say hi, goodbye, 10 minutes a week. Greetings, having a debrief conversation at the end of each workday, 20-minute chat, 5 workdays, hour and a bit a week. Part 3, admiration and appreciation, finding a way to compliment your person every day, 5-minute task. Part 4, affection, showing physical affection to your partner, hugs, kisses, snuggles, 5 minutes a day, 35 minutes a week. And then that weekly date, the biggest one, which is 2 hours out of that 168. But all of those little bits add up to roughly 5 hours a week. And that makes those 5 magic hours to have what was the language that you used? A truly extraordinary relationship.
Yeah, the one that's going to stand the test of time and you're going to feel connected throughout that time. I do want to add to that the affection. That affection, there's 2 standards for a hug and a kiss. A kiss is a 5-second kiss. And the Gottmans say a 5-second kiss is worth coming home to.
Mm.
And if you think about it, if you're going to kiss for 5 seconds, like you actually have to commit to kissing one another.
Yeah, it's not a little.
This is not a peck on.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Get some tongue action in there.
And the second is a hug for 20 seconds. That is how long it takes for your physiology to like relax. And so when you think about affection, it isn't just leading to sex or something deeper. It's that affection for its own sake, but having it be meaningful.
I hope I get this right, but I think it's Stan Tatkin did some research on that hug and on that connection and how your nervous system is truly linked with the person that you're choosing to do life with, and learning to regulate your nervous system or your partner's nervous system through that physical touch and through that reconnection, whether or not it's like synchronized breathing or that long, slow 20-second hug. And we've already talked about the 5 love languages, but if your partner's primary love language is physical touch, then it's even more important. So thank you for, taking us a little bit deeper into the touching and the squishy stuff.
Yeah, and that power of making eye contact. In this day and age when everybody's looking down at their phone or they're engaged with their computer, a partner can walk in and we don't even stop and look eye to eye with them. And it makes such a difference when they walk in, when you make eye contact and actually look happy to see them. That just changes everything.
So something that Nathan and I have been working on in this magic 5 hours, over the last global pandemic years, I have been working from home full time since about 2016, so well before pandemic times. And then Nath transitioned in 2020 to work from home for a bit. And then we've sort of now moved to this hybrid model where I'm at home all the time. Nath's at home part of the time, but goes to the office some days. And when he returned back to the office and we were reintroducing those parting end of day, like, hey, welcome back into our space kind of things, I was finding it incredibly jarring not knowing when Nath was going to arrive home. So something that I had to express a need, and it took me a little minute to figure it out, but it's like, hey, I need to kind of know when you're going to come home, just a little bit of warning so that I can prepare to greet you appropriately, so that I can prepare to shift gears and not be caught off guard that you're here, because when you arrive home, I want to show up for you, even if it's just for those 1 or 2 minutes to greet you, even if my work day's not done, but that's important to me and I want to be able to receive you. And it really did. It took me a little bit to be like, why is this bothering me so much? Why is him just arriving home? Because it wasn't at a predictable time either. And then I was getting really dysregulated about well, why didn't that go right? And it was setting the tone for our evenings. But I think we underestimate that, how much being responsible for the energy that you bring back into the space, but also the energy of receiving that person as they come back into your space can really set the tone for the next period of time that you're in each other's presence.
The most enduring habit my husband and I have, and we decided this at the very beginning of the relationship, is that whoever enters the house last has the responsibility to find the other person and kiss them and greet them. And it sounds very technical, but without that, we would have drifted in and out of the household, and maybe it would have been 15 minutes, it would have been half an hour, get pulled into something else. And there's constantly that reminder in my head, right, say hello to him and then go and do all of those other things.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that one of the other things that I guess just with, the change of working arrangements and things like that over the past couple of years, one of the things that we definitely noticed as well was that when we were working at home together, like obviously doing different jobs, but when we were at home together all the time, we weren't actually having those same kind of debrief chats at the end of our workday and that connection time at the end of our workday, because we had spent all day together and we felt like that we should be connected and should know what's going on with each other, because we haven't been anywhere else. Like we've literally been sitting right next to each other. And so I guess we didn't realize that we had stuff to catch up on. And so those kind of debrief chats fell away. Whereas definitely like when we had, or when one of us had left the house, like when I'd gone to the office or something like that and come home, we much more organically had some sort of debrief chat at the end of the day because we knew that we'd been apart and we'd been doing different things. And so we were having that time to kind of reconnect. So I think if other people are experiencing the same thing, like just have a look at your kind of daily routines and what might actually be affecting or what might have changed that's meant that connection time has dropped away.
Which one of those 5 elements of the magic hour could do with the tune-up?
Yeah.
So, Cheri, thank you so much for being here and having a really good conversation about conflict and repair and connection. But what I would love to know is, you're an expert. What are you doing in your own marriage, in your own relationship, that you would recommend to couples, particularly in the early stage? Like, what are some foundational habits, rituals, practices that they can embed to serve them for forever?
Getting into the habit of talking about things outside of your life. So not work, the kids, the house, family, that sort of stuff. Getting into the habit of talking about those random things or those deeper things, so that it just becomes habit that you bring up topics and maybe even look for topics to bring up where you can talk more deeply and really understand how each other is thinking about the world.
I know that one of the things that's been working for us recently, so we both set ourselves a goal this year to read a certain amount of books. I think Sammy's like double or triple what my goal was, but that's just some slightly
You have
different.
your strengths, I have mine.
Yeah, that's it. But I know that one of the things that's working for us at the moment is talking about something within a book that we've been reading that has been interesting, or just kind of like touching base with whatever chapter I'm up to at the moment and like what the latest thing was in that. Because, I mean, we often read kind of personal development type books, but sometimes it might just be a fiction or non-fiction book as well, that there's something interesting in it. But there always seems to be a topic that we're reading about at the time that we can have a really good conversation about.
I'm thinking about some of our friends, shout out Jess and Chris. Like, if there was a 6th love language, they both share this, and it's like the sharing of information. And they both just light each other up with like, oh my gosh, guess what I learned today?
This
or
fun
like
fact. So
this
like
fun
this.
fact. And like Chris is like, Chris, I love you, but man, you are the worst person to go to trivia with, because he is an information like hoarder. Like, he just knows a little bit about everything. But that's, I would say that that's one of their core pillars of their relationship. And we have lots of friends where we look to them and we admire elements of their relationship. We never want to take someone's and go like, how can we replicate all of that? But like, we pick and choose the bits that go, we really love how they do that. We could do with more of that. But that bringing in of new topics, conversations, I think, you framed it so beautifully around like, talk about things that are outside of your world, whether or not that's ideas or the future or imagine if kind of conversations, not just the logistics, not just the functional, not just the reporting.
I frequently suggest to couples that they read a relationship book together, like once a year or once every other year. And they always ask me which one to read. And I say, just pick one. Because reading a terrible relationship book together becomes something that you guys can talk about and agree on the ways that it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
And that's also just as powerful as reading one that really gives you lots of good information.
Yeah. I know that we did this on a road trip. We listened to an audio book. This was the
all or nothing marriage.
Yeah, this was a 17 or 18 hour road trip that we were on. Yeah, but we read the All or Nothing Marriage, and it was amazing.
Pause, chat,
Yeah.
start. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But like we said right in the beginning about using the framework like the 5 love languages or the 5 apology languages, or even that scale of important, not important, urgent, I think just provides such a great jumping off space for conversations. You don't have to agree with everything. You don't have to apply everything. You don't have to embed everything. But all of those ideas and frameworks that you share and you both have a common understanding of helps build that literacy and that language that you share. And yeah, I guess it's like the culture of your relationship. And what is it that what do we do? What do we not do? How do we behave? How do we not behave? What are the boundaries? What are my expectations for you? What are my expectations for myself? What am I okay with? All built up with shared learning. And like Nath said at the beginning, understanding that the person that Nath was yesterday is not the person that he is today. He learned something yesterday that he didn't know. So he's different now and I'm different now. So I really like that, prioritizing bringing new ideas or concepts into your dialogue. So Cheri, if there was one last thing that you wanted to share before we wrap up, what would it be?
The other thing that new couples can do that really matters is to fix their relationship problems. Learn how to argue, learn how to repair, learn how to talk about things. Couples wait an average of 6 years before they get help. So dealing with that early means that you don't spend 6 years of hurting each other and letting each other down that then all needs to be cleaned up.
Imagine if you were limping around on a broken leg for 6 years. Like, you wouldn't tolerate it, would you? You'd be like, probably time to go see a doctor. Probably time to go get some external help to sort this thing out that's hurting me every day.
Well, part of it is that they're not always miserable. They're in a cycle where things are good and then things fall apart and then things are good again. And they limp along that way. So trying to get rid of that bad part of the cycle, the part where you argue or don't get along or you can't communicate about things, means that you get to stay in that better part of the cycle for much more of your relationship.
And wouldn't it be advantageous to go and seek external coach, psychotherapist, counselor, whatever it might be, when you're in the up part of the cycle rather than the down part? I don't know who the quote is, but it's like the best time to fix a leaky roof is while the sun's out.
Absolutely. It builds so much good. You already have so much goodwill towards each other that is a good time to talk about the problems.
Yeah, I love that. And a big part of us starting the show and having these conversations is to encourage people that go and get help. If you are uncomfortable, if there's something not working the way that you want it to, go ask for help. Like, there's so many incredible coaches, resources, people out there, and try them on for size. Find someone who's going to fit your vibe, your style, your relationship, what it is that you want to get out of it. But yeah, get rid of the stigma, get rid of the shame, like, seek help and create an incredible relationship and life that you love. So Cheri, thank you so much for being here and sharing a little bit about your own relationship and your expertise. But to say thank you, we've provided a student in Indonesia with a week's worth of classroom education. So this project in particular is really special. It's in Borneo, but it's specifically for girls. So we get girls into schooling, and we know that when girls are educated, they lift up their families, their communities, and their countries. So thank you so much for making that possible.
That's such an amazing part of your program.
Oh, no worries. Thanks. So, Cheri, people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about your coaching. How can they do that?
Probably the best place to find me is in my Facebook group. That's where I hang out, and you can actually interact with me easily. It's Date Night Community. It is focused on this idea of dating your spouse so that you continue to grow that relationship over time. One of the really cool things is that every week I release a new set of conversation questions. And those are questions to stimulate this other kind of discussion to help you talk more deeply about things. So the assumption is you're going to go on a date, and here are a few questions to talk to each other about.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Great resource. Hey, because I think sometimes we do get a bit stuck in the like same. So having a resource like that can be really great to help guide to where you want to be. So thank you for sharing that. That's really, really generous of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been a great time to talk about this.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.